This is Judge Joe Brown, and you're watching We All Be News TV, the
News-free Dixie.
News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Right, Dr. Johnson, you are here in front of the Bedford ForREst statue. It's Bedford ForREst Day. For the last 112, 113 years, the Sunday before his birthday on July 13th, he is honored by the sons and daughters of Confederacy. Sometimes hundreds of times, thousands of white folks from around the country come out to pay homage to this man. What are your thoughts about him or about this,
Well,
place?
my thoughts about him thoughts are pretty plain. We know what Bedford ForREst really stood for, what he meant to this city, to this state, and indeed to this nation. We know that he was a slave owner, the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. We know that he was as anti-black as one can be. However, the celebrations that and the embrace that he still have is just amazing. And like you just mentioned, 112, 113 years, they've been doing this, and they continue to do this on land, public land, that we all pay tax dollars toward for upkeep. And to me, this is just something real simple. When this statue first was erected, groups of Memphians, matter of fact, the majority of Memphians thought it was a good thing for this to be erected. Now, are we still saying that it's a good thing for this to be erected and to have this space in place? And if it's not, then we ought to move it or to take it down or ought to do something else about it. But it is just amazing that we can still come, they can still come and celebrate, and then we can still have this statue here on Union and passing it day in and day out.
Wow, so it's funny, this town is basically 70% black. Yeah. We're paying taxes on this statue, this symbol, some people would say a white supremacy racism, but yet the talk about reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans is a joke to a lot of people in this country. So what do you say to that?
I mean, and here's the for me, let me just touch on the reparations argument. We don't even have to go back as far as slavery, even though that would be admirable. That would be something you ought to do. We can just talk about the taxes that African Americans and others had to pay in for services and for places and spaces they were not allowed to attend, or services they could not even get. So for instance, you're talking now about people's grandmothers and grandfathers. We're talking about people still living, because in the 60s and 50s, people were working day in and day out and could not use public facilities. You could not go to the public schools. You could not go to the public university. You could not go to the public zoo, to the public libraries. So if we're going to talk about reparations, you could talk about it in tax abatements and tax refunds of many people who have, and with compounded interest, many people who have paid in. So we're not even having to go all the way back, even though, like I said, that would be admirable. What we can do is talk about the injustice that are happening with people that are still here. And we know this for a fact, because the good news is that the city of Memphis and the county of Shelby kept good records as it relates to slavery, as it relates to enslaved folk being passed down from generation to generation, because they wanted to make sure back then that their property got passed to the right people. And now we have all of this paperwork down in probate court clerk's office that we can easily look and we can make those connections, but we do not have the will to do so.
Wow, that's some powerful statements you made. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I want to ask you this. I know the New Orleans mayor did something that was interesting. Mitch Landrieu, impressed. They removed all the Confederate statues out of the city. And I know I talked to some people here, and I asked them, were they willing to consider that we could put up a monument to the victims of Nathan Bedford ForREst, the enslaved Africans, or the Fort Pillow Massacre victims, and they said it'd be okay. Some people said let's put up some markers, but not a monument on the same scale as this one. What's your take on that?
Right. Well, I mean, if we want to do history and do it right, and we want to always talk about reconciliation, we always want to talk about healing, we always want to talk about, working together, moving forward. Part of that is to recognize our history and our past and to own up to it. So if we are serious about that, that would be a great thing to do. But back to Landry, Mayor Landry down in New Orleans. This is just a person who had the will to do that. And that's all it would take. It would just take a person saying that this is why we're doing it. We do not acknowledge, or this does not this statute do not tell who we are as a city of Memphis. It is not something that we want to celebrate any longer. So we're gonna take it down. And when you do that, you are taking full responsibility of the history, and you are doing something about it in order to move forward. And that's all that needs to be done here.
Excellent. I don't think I'm actually talking about the 1 year anniversary of the I-40 bridge. I don't assume we could shut it down every year.
No.
Like they have their ceremonies here.
Right.
But what is? I mean, it's like you can't really get any justice for black people in this system of white. I mean, it's white supremacy, racism.
Right.
So what is really that we need to be doing that we trying to put off? I mean, you are an expert on Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. What would he do if he was alive?
Do basically what we're doing now, but not expecting anything to change. And let me explain that.
Okay.
That when we bear witness, and that's what the bridge was last year. That's what many of the protests have. When we're talking about bearing witness, instead of trying to argue for persuasion, trying to persuade and trying to move people to do what they ought to do. When people can't be persuaded, the only thing left to do is to just stand your ground and bear witness to the atrocity that is happening and say, here I am, I'm ready to suffer the consequences. This is what Turner is trying to do back in the 19th century. This is what King, believe it or not, in a new work that I'm working on that I hope to have some excerpts out online pretty soon. King's rhetoric in his last year of his life was talking about shutting down Washington, D.C., shutting down cities, and just having massive protests and demonstrations in order to not persuade. Because he's argued that, hey, I can't persuade them any longer. But by just sheer conviction and by sheer witness, that they would just say, okay, we just have to do this, or the whole system, unless we are talking about shutting down the entire system, or we're talking about shutting down a segment of the system, nothing is going to change, nothing is going to matter. People are going to come in and co-opt some of the movement and some of the ideas and some of the things and make people feel good, and you know, that's not what a good movement or protest makes. What makes for a good protest is concrete markers, understanding what it is that you want to do, and going there, achieving your goal by, persuasion, if happenstance, or by just bearing witness and by just showing people all across the country the injustice that is happening to the people.
Do you have any thoughts or final words you'd like to share with us in this segment as relates to anything that's on your mind right now?
I just want to remind everybody that a healthy, prophetic, pessimistic attitude is healthy, and it should be the attitude we take. What I mean by that is we don't quit, we don't give up, we don't throw up our hands, we keep coming out, we come to this, we bear witness to the fact that Nathan Bedford ForREst was a slave seller, enslaved. He sold enslaved people, and that he was part of the founding member of the KKK. We bear witness to that, and we do all of this knowing that things will not change today, tomorrow, or maybe the next day, but we bear witness in this long history, and we want to be on the right side of history. 50 years from now, somebody's going to ask, where were you when? And a lot of people that's going to have to make up some stories. And they're going to have to just stress the truth. Just like everybody who said they march with King.
Right.
So you just want to be on the right side of history. You just want to go down the right side of history because the universe may, as King said, bend toward justice, but it shows slow.
Dr. Johnson, thank you so much. What's the best way we can contact you or follow some of your content online?
You can hit me up on Facebook or Twitter. Twitter is A.E. Johnson, PhD. A.E. Johnson, PhD. And you can reach my blog at Rhetoric, Race, and Religion. Just Google that. It's the first thing that pops up, and you can read some of those pieces as well.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. The words of Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing.
Thank you.
Thank
you for your witness.
Lose the faith.